And what you want to be doing is making sure that you are looking at those homework / practice problems are not graded, okay? You just want to look at these practice problems, and there are a lot of them, so you don't want to wait until right before the quiz to do this, because then you really wouldn't get through them all. If you don't get through them all, then you maybe haven't practiced every one of the different tasks that you have, because they're all kind of small problems that have different things in them. So you want to make sure you start early on those, to start working through them. And then next Tuesday, we meet in UCBB 126, which is downstairs, first floor, over to the right, and that is one of only 2 class days that I need for you to attend at the time that you're registered for. Okay, other days, lectures, no, not a problem, because we're okay. But on those particular days, there's a capacity constraint of the room, and so we need to make sure that people show up at the time that they're registered for. So you would need to do that day. Okay, so, we have already started on this. You saw the things that we had done last time. You saw that open up at 5:30, and so you were able to see other little miscellaneous things that we did here, stressing the point of what you see on the screen is not necessarily what the true contents of the cell are. Some of the protection things that you can do and hide and all of that. We went into the sales data, where really one of the major things out of this was relative and absolute addressing, but also understanding that spaces are characters, and then learning the sum product on that sheet. We really drove home the relative and absolute addressing with this example, which had sort of a little variety of everything there, and then talked about naming cells and how naming cells would then make any reference to them an absolute reference. And so now we pick up with charts. And I gotta tell you, when it comes to charts, in one hand, I would almost not spend too terribly much time doing it, because I know that whether you took your MIS 3300 here or whether you took it in another place, that you did a thing on charts. I know that you did this. You made a chart, you maybe changed it to 3D, and you put a little label on it and turned it, and anyway, you turned in your assignment, all the little things it asked you to do. But this isn't going to be so much about the formatting, although I am going to show you some things with formatting. I just want to get some of the basics out there and then talk about this comparison between the different charts that you might use and when it would be most appropriate to use one versus another, and then how they relate to each other, how they're like or not like each other, until we eventually get down to the one that we use in this class. So we're going to start with this data up here, where we have our consumer purchases by 3 different categories over an 8-year time span. Okay. And if I was going to do a chart, let me back up one second real quick, and I'm going to mention again why I'm not totally neglecting charts when we do an Excel review. Because when you are, for other reasons, working in Excel, all kinds of things that you do in Excel, you've got large amounts of data presented on a worksheet, numeric data, that the chart is one of the best ways for you to consolidate, summarize, aggregate, whatever you want to say, that information and show it to somebody in a way that makes sense to them, because they begin to be able to compare things and look at trends and do all kinds of things by taking that large amount of numeric quantitative data and pulling it in and putting it in a picture. A picture's worth 1,000 words. So it's just, and in this case, it's data points. But anyway, so you've got that idea. So that's why we're not neglecting this completely. But I do know that you've seen and worked with charts in any intro class that you had. So I just want to reinforce a couple of things. One, this right here, I'm on cell E5. Okay, that's a data point. That 12,546, that's just a data point. We don't plot a single data point into a chart because, well, that's not very interesting to put a data point on a chart. We plot points on a chart that are a part of a data series. And it turns out this number in this data is a part of 2 different data series. Are there no extra chairs? There's no chair there? Okay. Well, now we will have a little bit.
You can take mine if you want.
No, you know what? Either grab that one, or Ann can sit in that one, and you can sit in Ann's spot back there with the table, and she can just sit. So, sorry about that. But that is. enough chairs, should be enough chairs for every spot. Okay, that's weird, I'll have to mention that to them. Okay, you guys are good. Okay, so that data point is actually a part of two different data series. It's a part of the data series where we have the three different divisions in the year 2006. It's a part of the data series that is footwear over the 8-year time period. So it's a part of two different data series. In and of itself, it's just a single data point, but it's actually a part of two different data series. Data series are what we plot, okay, in a chart. Now, even if I was going to just plot one of these, like the equipment, all I have to plot are those 8 numbers. But I would be inclined to pull in a few labels along the way too, because it'd make my life a little easier, and I'd have some of the labels and titles in there without having to get them all in there later myself. And so even if I was just gonna plot that equipment, those 8 years of equipment sales, I would actually do this. I would pick up all the way from A3 to I4 because I'd want to get as many labels in there as I could. I'd go to the insert on the, then you go to insert, all these different charts here. Here are some of the really common ones that we would use. I'm going to go in and choose a line chart. You notice there's all kinds of different choices for line charts. You've got regular lines stacked, with and without markers, three-dimensional lines. Don't get me started on that. But anyway, I'll just put one in that's got the line, the marker, because I'm going to show you something. So here's my thing about this. The one thing I don't want to spend a lot of time on is formatting. And so I don't want that to be a part of everything we do. So I get it out of the way right at the beginning. Okay. I pulled in some labels by just selecting that. Oh, I want to show you something else too. By just selecting that. So while speaking of that, oh, now we do have a problem. Okay, and you can take Ann's spot. No, it's okay. I told you guys that you could move around, and usually it's okay. This is a little more, I guess people are not wanting to get here at 10, or there's way too much traffic, and so that's probably what a lot of this is. But, Ann, you can take this chair back there. You can lower it. Jeez, I'm afraid you can't lower it because half the things are caught. And if you want to get this, it's a lot of them are locked, so you kind of have to drag it. But anyway, and you can lower the chair. Okay. Oh yeah, that's you sure? Because you're not using. Okay.
I was here the last time.
I know, but okay. Well, if one more person comes in, I guess you're okay. So maybe, but it's really interesting because there are a bunch of seats that aren't at some of these tables, and so we really do need to figure out. Yeah. Okay. Okay, do you want to come up here to this spot? Yeah. He was in the last class, he was just kind of listening, but you're welcome to sit back there and listen too, still if you want to. Okay. We'll just get us in line. All right. Well, on second thought, if you're at 10 o'clock, try to come at 10 o'clock, even though there will be days, I understand, where things will happen. I guess and I also am going to try to get a couple extra chairs in here in the spots that don't have them. Okay, back to what we were doing. First of all, you see that the chart is made from the data that, is in the underlying chart. So if I went into any one of these, if I went into the year 2005 and I changed that to 1900 instead of 19,000, that would immediately reflect in the chart where you see it, okay? And that would be true too if the year 2005 was 2015. Not that we would put 2015 between 2004 and 2006, but anything that when you did this, it pulled directly, from that. It pulled directly from the chart, and it made, it made the change here. Okay, so I'm going to switch that back. A couple of chairs. We have 2 spots. Okay. Okay. was saying. Okay, I don't wanna spend a lot of time formatting, but I want you to see how much formatting could be done and how you would do it if you wanted to do that. First of all, things in Excel, when you are, in it, what is an Excel object, whether it's a chart, whether it's a list, whether it's a pivot table, whatever it is, when you are in it, you have tools that aren't available to you when you're not in it. Okay, so when you look up here, you see these chart tools, this design and format, that if you weren't in the chart, you wouldn't have those, okay? So here they are, and on the design tab, if there are things that you didn't have in there before, you can add them in. Some of those things were picked up. You know, the Axis labels, you know, were picked up from the data. Well, that's from the data, but that from when I put, you know, chose the years and put equipment up there. But you don't have Axis titles. You can put the Axis titles in there. You can put grid lines. You can put legends, which you wouldn't do with just one data series. But you could do all of those things if you wanted to. Another thing is that on the actual, and then there's some preset designs you can just go with. Okay, but on the format tab of those chart tools, the chart, when you look over to the far left-hand side, you'll see that whatever you happen to be in at this moment, you have the ability to format that selection. And I want you to see this, not because we're going to do all the formats. I'll do something real fast just so you can see the difference, the different segments. But if I do format the chart area, here's what I want you to look. Okay. There's an endless amount of stuff that you could do here. You have chart options and text options. And under this one, which is the fill in the line, you've got the fill. That doesn't look like a ton of stuff until you say something like, I want it to be a gradient fill, and then look at the amount of stuff that you could do to that gradient fill, the adjustments that you could make to that. And that doesn't even count the border, which you have a whole set of things that you can do to that as well. Okay, so some of these spots, like right here, if you guys can scooch down just a little bit. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. And this is just, I know you kind of have to watch this too, but anyway, this is just the beginning. And then there are these shadowing, glowing 3D effects we can put on everything, and all kinds of other size and property things, which are actually probably pretty useful. And then, on top of that, there are text options that have all of this same kind of stuff too. This was endless, and I was only on one part of the chart. It was absolutely so much stuff that you couldn't take that much time unless you were just like, you know, a graphic designer, and that's really what you wanted to do. But there was so much stuff in there. And that was just the chart area. If I click again, I'm in the plot area. It has almost as many things you can do to it. I can put a really ugly looking texture picture in here if I want to. This is just going to be a hideous looking graph by the time I'm done with it because I'm wanting you to see each part of it. It has all of these options as well. I click again and I'm on the data series. And the data series has things that you can do with the line and the marker. You know, maybe I don't like the color of that line. Maybe I think that that line should be super thick. And all kinds of things. And I click again. Oh wait a minute, before I do that, let's make the markers where we can at least see them. On the marker options, I could make it a whole lot bigger than it is. And amazingly enough, a marker has both an inside and an outside. The fill has a color. Okay, and the border has a color, which you can't see very well, so I'm going to have to make it wider. Okay, and I can click again and click on just one of those, and let's just change it to something really fast and make it, oh, I was on all of them. Back up. I just wanted to be on one of them. There. And of course you can do all the normal things that you could do to text to change, even make it word art like text for titles and all kinds of things. You can rescale this axis. You can go in here, and I actually like this one on the horizontal axis. You can go over one of the places, and you'll look for it later, and you can tilt this, because I think that one can actually be quite useful, to tell you the truth, because sometimes you have longer things than will fit there and you need to turn them. Okay. Alright, so this is an awful looking chart right now. But do you see how every time I clicked on something new, I brought up the formats that went with that? And some of them, it was a huge amount of formats to go with it, like the chart area and the plot area. But to be honest with you, there's a ton of stuff you can do with the line and the marker as well, okay? And so, okay, so there's a ton of stuff that you can do with that as well. And that's not what I want us to spend our time on. And that's not to say that I don't think that you should format your charts. That'll look better than this, okay? But it's not to say I don't think you should format your charts. I'm just saying that's not what I want us to focus on here. As long as you know where you can find it, you can do what you need to do. So I'm going to get rid of our hideous looking chart and go back to what I really want us to focus in a little bit more on. And it's this. When we make a chart, we do so because we're trying to get our audience to see something in particular. We're trying to sell them something, we're trying to convince them of something, we're trying, to get a raise, I don't know, whatever it is we're trying to do. Okay, we're trying to do something. And so I'm going to take this data right here, which includes footwear and apparel for the 8 different years. And I have pulled in the data, which would be the data series, which are the numbers, and I've also pulled in the categories, I've pulled in the years. Okay? I'm going to go to insert another line chart real quickly. This time it has multiple lines on it. I just want us to look at this real quickly. Okay. When I do a line chart like this, what am I trying to get the user to focus on?
Differences between change.
Wait a minute, you said 2 different things there.
Differences between lines and change over time.
The change over time. Okay, so that's the primary focus. You're right that they can do both. You see the differences between them also. But the primary focus when you do a line chart is that you're trying to get them to see a trend or a change over time. That's the primary focus of it. Now, secondarily, can they see the difference between these? Oh, absolutely. Secondarily, they can see the difference between equipment, which is always higher than footwear, which is always higher than apparel. Yes, they can see that. But you're trying to get them with a line chart to focus on that trend over time. And a line chart is going to have time on the x-axis. Okay? Okay. Now, I'm going to go up here, and it's on the design ribbon, and it's changed the chart type. There are a lot of subtypes. I don't like stacked lines. We'll get to stacked columns in a minute, and they make sense because a person knows what they are. I'm not a fan of stacked lines. I think you'd have to have a lot of information for your user to say this is what this is, because otherwise they would look at it and it would just look like a line to them. They wouldn't really have that information. But one other thing that you can do is an area chart, which is the line shaded in. This doesn't work for all data. It works fine for this because our lines never cross each other. And even sometimes if they cross just a little bit, it's not a huge deal. But what if footwear sales had dropped and they went down below apparel? We wouldn't really know if they came down here and leveled off or if they just plummeted because we wouldn't be able to see it in this one. Does that mean you never use an area chart? No, you gotta look at your data. Okay, some data fits well with it and some doesn't fit well with it. This data works just fine with an area chart. But it is one you have to be a little bit careful in that respect and to see that that's true of any chart. You put your data into that chart type and then you have to kind of figure out, did it still look okay? Was that all right? Okay. But the area and the line have that same focus, that same trend or change over time. When you change the chart type to something like either a column, which would be vertical, or bars, which would be horizontal, okay? So if you change one of those, I'll do the columns. It is the exact same data, but you're focusing the user's attention on what? Focusing their attention on what?
The difference varying the
The comparisons, when you say the difference, the comparison, because the comparisons between these things. Does that mean they can't see what's happening over time? Well, no, they can still see what's happening over time. It's just not the primary focus. The primary focus is the comparison between those things. They still can see that equipment's going up, and here's this kind of went up and then went down. What's this? Apparel. Yes, they can still see trends over time, but their focus is on the comparison. So which do you want to do? I don't know. What do you want your audience to notice? You have to stop and say to yourself, who's my audience? What do they need to see? What am I trying to sell them on, convince them of, give them information on? And then you set it up appropriately. Now, even when you're in these charts and you have these subtypes, like we were talking about with the line, with and without markers. Okay, so in a column, the stacked does make sense, and someone does know what it is. So you make a stacked column. It's, to me, completely different than when you make a stacked line. When you make a stacked column, yeah, the user knows what that is. You gain a little, you lose a little with this. What do you gain with this? What can you see in this that you couldn't see when they were clustered? The total. The total. You can see the total now. You couldn't see the total before. What do you have a harder time seeing with this one than you could see with the cluster? The comparisons of the things, especially the ones that are particularly close to each other. Like these are really close to the same size. It's a much harder here for us to tell which one's larger, which one's smaller. The color could be impacting that and everything else. So you gain a little, you lose a little, okay? But you do see totals that you didn't see before, and that may be more important to you than the exact differences between these, okay? Notice on that one, where they were clustered, and on this one where they're stacked, that the y-axis are the numeric values of the sales dollars, okay? Watch when I change this to 100% stacked. Check out the y-axis. Okay. It's percents. It's no longer dollar values because everything is going to the top, going to 100%. And each year, what I'm seeing is the percent breakdown that made up equipment versus footwear versus apparel. Okay. Now, that's a very useful kind of chart as well. But I will tell you, in this one, you wouldn't have any idea if in 1 year you had $8 million in sales and the next year you had only $80,000 in sales. You wouldn't know that. You can't see that here. Now, if that did happen, you might want to put some labeling in here, put some numbers so that people could see some things so they would be aware of that, because in and of itself you can't see that anymore because you don't have those numbers. You simply have the proportional breakdown. Okay? Okay. So I'm going to take that chart and make it small and move it over. Because another chart that we use that does proportional breakdowns is what? Pie chart. Yeah, pie chart. But a pie chart, and I'll show you something that can do this, but a pie chart, a traditional pie chart, can only have one data series on it. So I can't put all of footwear, apparel, I'm going to pick one or the other. I can't put every year, I put 1 year. So if I wanted to see just one thing here, okay, watch what I'm going to do here because this is important. It will apply to other things when you're working when putting stuff in. But if I wanted to see footwear, okay, over the years, I would be inclined to select the years because I know that they're labels that I need, right? But do you notice that I just selected that starting in A3? Super important, okay, because I'm also going to pick up the footwear title here. These things have to match, and if they don't match, you don't get the chart you think you're going to get. You don't get the right thing. You try it later, okay? So I highlighted A3 to I3 and then held the control key and did A5 to I5. And now I'm going to insert a pie chart that has some of my labels on it. It has footwear as the title, has the years, so it's color-coded. It's a super boring one because from year to year, our stuff didn't change very much. So I'm just going to make it small and move it over. Instead, and I'm going to repeat what I just did last time, instead I'm just going to show you a particular year. Let's do 2007. I am highlighting because I know that I will want the category names in there. Notice that I'm highlighting A3 to A6, holding the control key, going over here, grabbing 2007. I cannot just put those three. I will not get the chart that I think I'm gonna get if those ranges don't match each other, okay? And then when I insert a pie chart, I just personally think it's a more interesting pie chart because there's more difference between the the categories, the divisions, than there is between year to year to year. And so I think it's more interesting. But the other reason I want to show you this is that this, 2007, that's that right there, isn't it? That's that one column. I was able to get all 8 years on this one. That's great, okay? I can't do that with a pie chart. There is a chart similar that I can use, and we can kind of look at it. I'll do it. Let's make this one smaller and I'll look at it. Something that looks a lot like a pie chart, kind of falls in that same category, is something called a donut chart. It actually has it under the pie chart stuff. Let me just switch this real fast. We'll be talking about that in a minute. Okay, so you can see the similarity between this and this, the blue, the red, the green, okay? This just has the 8 concentric circles that make up the 8 different years. They aren't labeled whatever, they make up the 8 different years. And then, of course, those are footwear just like this, footwear, equipment, apparel, everything you have. I am not a big fan of this chart at all, okay? If I need to see them all 8 at once, I would be inclined to do this. That may be just a personal preference thing, okay? But you at least now know that exists, donut chart. And it's gone. Okay. One interesting thing about, well, every single one of these charts, you can turn them into 3D. Okay, so you could have turned them into 3D, and once you turn them into 3D, you have the ability to move the focus and look at them differently, and so, if you want to do that, that's an interesting thing to do. Another thing with pie charts I kind of like is that you can explode a piece of a pie chart out for emphasis, for, whatever you want to do. I do want to show you something. It doesn't apply to ours, but I do want you to see it because it is kind of a good one. If you ever are trying to make a pie chart out of something that has a lot of categories to it, okay? And usually when that's the case, you have some of the big players, then you have the sort of medium-sized ones, and then you maybe have a ton of little ones, very almost indistinguishable from each other, and there's like too many slices for one pie, and you're not sure your user's getting anything out of it. There's a couple of choices. One of them is right here. They don't apply to ours, but this pie of pie and this bar of pie, what they do is they allow you to take those whole bunch of little ones and pull them out into their own separate pie to expand it, or into their own separate bar to expand it, so that you can get the detail that you were missing, in the great big pie where they were all really tiny and other things were big, okay? So those are just nice ones to know. But anyway. Okay, so that's kind of a Reader's Digest version of those 3, but there's one more thing that I want to talk about in a different kind of chart. What we had in that other data was time series data, okay? So it was over a period of time. So on the x-axis, we were always going to have time, and it didn't make any sense to switch it to the other axis, okay? But in this one, we sell Windsor stoves. We sell 4 different types of stoves in 3 different states. Okay, so we sell these. If I go to just real quickly insert a column chart here, by default, this is just what Excel did, just quickly on its own, it decided to cluster the 3 states within each type of stove. And maybe that's what I want. I don't know. But maybe, and there's a little quick button up here on the design ribbon that says switch the rows and columns. Maybe I would have rather seen the 4 stoves clustered in the 3 different states. We don't know the answer to this because we don't work for this stove company for real. Okay, but if you did, you would know what you were trying to get your audience to pay attention to. Which way do you want them to see it? You know, like, I don't know, but which way do you want them to see it? That's the way you would do. I didn't do this switch before when we were dealing with time series data because it didn't make sense really to do it then. But when we have two categorical variables like this, one of them being the states, one of them being the types of stoves, well then it does make sense that you may want it one way or the other. And so that's a real quick thing you can do. If your data is ever not picked up appropriately, it's not, like the default that shows up isn't what you wanted, boom, click the button to switch the rows and columns and perhaps that will be, you know, what you wanted. So it's a quick and easy thing to do. Okay, I've done all that chart talking and we don't use these charts in this class. It's just, they're just not ones that we use. I don't think we should do an Excel review without running through charts kind of quickly. The more important part, I think, being the comparison of knowing what to use when, because you'll always be able to find the formats. There is one chart that we use, and that's the one I want to look at here. We use in our modeling and in our analysis of the results afterwards and different things that we do, we will use what's called either an XY or a scatter chart, okay? Those are ones where you have paired numeric variables being plotted. Okay, paired variables like in this case where you had this person studied this long, got this grade. This person studied this long, got this grade. We plot these because we believe or want to see if a relationship exists between these things. Does a relationship exist between study time and grade? And you plot on what the first one, which is X, okay, on the x-axis, you go over this study time and up to that grade, and the y-axis would be the grade. This looks like, let's do it real quick. All right, so this one is the XY scatter plot, whichever one you want to call it, okay, where most often what you do is just plot the data points. So you see these other choices about imposing smooth lines or straight lines on them, and to be honest with you, that looks weird, and you're thinking, okay. If you are going to put the lines connecting the dots, there's something you have to do. This is taking the first data point, the 4 at the 78, then going to the 7 and the 86, and then back to the 5, then back to the 8, then back to the 2, back to the, it's going in order. And so if you did want to do this, you would have to go in, and I'm going to do this quickly because sorting doesn't come up till later, okay, and then just in the interest of time right now. You would have to sort your data where it's sorted by your X variable, mine being study time, to be able to do this. However, with that said, okay, with that said, that is not going to be the one that I would use, and we won't really use it because really, well,